Good day, folks. Welcome back to the channel. Happy New Year, if you believe in that sort of thing. We have a new video series for you today. We've been experimenting with BLoC and Provider and using those two in conjunction, and it's gone pretty well. We've used them in kind of silly circumstances where you could see the possibilities, but they really weren't put to the test. And so I started putting together a series around Christmas time. It was going to be a weather app, which would help with predicting weather like this. But then I sat down to film it, and I thought the last thing the world needs is another marginally functional weather app. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to build a departure board for a regional rail line. It's going to be the Southeast Pennsylvania Transportation Authority, or SEPTA, regional rail system. But the idea is that you could probably take this and adapt it to any rail system in the world. It's going to look like this. We're going to use the Google font package to make it actually look like a departure board. We're going to have settings where the user can set any station that they're at in the regional rail system, and it will pull up the next trains that are coming through. The data you'll find is going to be less than ideal, so this is kind of a real-world situation. We get used to, in the startup industry, having our data and our databases being very modern, built for our purposes. That's not the way it works in the real world. A lot of times you get some database that's been around since the 70s and was built in COBOL and is not meant to be doing what it's doing now. And I think that's what we got here. We're gonna have to do some clever modeling to sugar this into something that we want to put on the screen, which is good practice for us. So that's the objective for this series. I don't know how far we'll take it, but we're gonna go ahead and get started. You will need Visual Studio Code. You'll obviously need the Flutter SDK. And I'm also going to use Postman, which you do not need to have installed. I'm just going to use it to kind of format the JSON so we can look at it better. But if you want to go ahead and download that, you're welcome to. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so I have created a project. I've typed Flutter create train departures, train_departures, just to get us started. Before we dive into that, though, I want to take a look at the data that we're going to be dealing with. And so you can Google SEPTA API. It should be the top result there. I will put the URL in the description if you want to just jump to that. But it's if it doesn't come up, it's www.3.septa.org/hackathon. So really interesting URL. That is the page that's not the URL endpoint. That's the page that is an HTML page that has the different endpoints that SEPTA offers. The system has trains, it has trolleys, it has buses, and it's got all different kinds of endpoints. The one we're concerned with is I don't know, about a page worth down on a full screen right here. Regional rail stations, arrivals, departures in JSON. We have a couple different options here. It's the same, but we could use a station name or a station ID. It also has a property to limit the number of results, and that's by direction. So if you have 5, you'll get 5 northbound, 5 southbound. There is a CSV file up here that contains the names and station IDs. We will deal with that at a later time. In a later episode, we'll bring that into our app so that we can reference the station names, station IDs for our settings page, our drop-down. If you click on this, you get some results here for a suburban station. You get 5 each way. It's kind of garbled here, so I went ahead and put this in Postman. You don't have to do that yourself, but you're welcome to. And then I hit so if you hit raw, this is what you get in the browser, but if you hit pretty, it formats it up a little bit for you. And it looks off the bat, if you look quickly, it looks like really nice data. We have these objects here, these repeating objects. We have an array that is a train. So it's a direction that the train is going. It's the ID of the train. It is where it started from. It's where it's going. The line, all this stuff here, track, depart time, scheduled time, and its status, whether it's on time. This one is 1 minute late, whether it's a local express, etc. So this is a really nice, clean object that we're going to model. As you go up from there, though, it does get kind of wonky. I work in the healthcare industry. I run into this a lot where databases and services are built a long time ago for completely different purposes, and you as the developer are having to take them and put them into a more usable format. And we're definitely going to do that here. Item number one on the less than ideal part of this is that the main key is dynamic. So this is the name of the station that you are requesting departures for. This is the time that you requested it. So if I hit send again, I think we'll get, instead of 9:57, we've now let 4 minutes go by. That's awfully difficult to grab that because we never know what the tag is going to be. So that's less than ideal. Then it gives you an array, and there's two objects in the array. They have no key. And that's the end of one, and this is the beginning one. And basically, they are their own array of trains going southbound or northbound. And instead of having like a tag here that says direction northbound and direction southbound, the key to the array is northbound or southbound, which is also less than ideal, especially because we have the direction right here as a field in the train. So we're going to have to do a little bit of massaging as developers to take less than ideal data and present it to the user in an ideal way. And the way we structure this, you should be able to take any backend. You can take the Tubes API or whatever transportation API you want, and we should be able to create another block for that as long as we can massage it into our train object that we present on the screen. So that's the data we're going to be dealing with. I just wanted to introduce that before we got started. We'll shrink that. So back in Visual Studio Code, I want to go ahead and bring in the dependencies first. So we're going to need a few here, right there. So let's bring back this. I'm going to go to pub.dev, which is the package manager for Dart and Flutter. And we're going to grab RxDart because we'll definitely be using that for the block. So I will grab this off the installing tab and I will stick it right here after Cupertino icons. We are definitely going to need HTTP because we are working with a RESTful endpoint. So let's grab that. We're going to need Provider because we're going to use Provider for our dependency injection for our block. And we're going to need a few more, but I'm going to leave it at that for now because these are going to be the packages that we use today. When we go to the presentation layer, we're going to need a few more. When we're ready to save our preferences to our device, we're going to need shared preferences to do that. But let's stick with this for now. Today's objective is to build the block and to build the provider and to get that data from the REST point and model it and get it into a nice Dart object for our use. So let's just stick with these packages because that's all we need to do that today. So I'll save that. I am gonna fire up the emulator now. So I'll go to lib, I'll go to main.dart and start debugging. And while that runs, it's going to be a while before we actually work with that. So while that runs, let's do our typical thing where we clean out the main page here a little bit. So I'm going to take out these comments. I'm actually going to leave... No, I'm not. Let's take everything out here. So we'll start with class, my homepage. I was going to leave it in place, but I just can't stand it. Let's get rid of it. Everything below the class, my homepage. And so in our lib folder, let's build a new folder for our screens. We're going to have 2 to get started. We'll have a departure screen and we'll have a settings screen. So we will have a screen folder, screens. We will add a new file and let's just create departure.dart for now. I'm going to change that to departures. Very good. And so we'll create class departures, extends stateful widget. And we will need a build method. Oop. I'm sorry, I meant stateless widget. Jeez. I don't know why it didn't look right. All right, so then we'll have a build method. Let's return a scaffold. Let's give it an app bar. And let's just give it a title with a text of station. And then we'll have a body. And for now, we'll just put a center. We will put a child. A child will have a text widget, and we'll say the body. All right. And then for my home page, we're just going to put departures here. And then we're going to restart the app because I did not intend to change that much on it. So I should have waited before I changed that to start. But that'll at least give us just a starting blank screen with something to look at. And so what I want to focus on today is the data and building that building the block that will get and store the data in our state. So let's come back here to our lib folder and let's build a new folder called models. And in that models folder, let's create a model for our train. So train.dart. And so we want class train. And so we need to decide what properties that we want. So if I bring Postman back up, you know, what we want on our screen is really pretty simple. We want to know the direction that this train is going. We are going to want to know where it's going, so the destination here. We're going to want to know the status. Is it on time? Is it late? And if so, by how much? We want to know when it's departing, because remember, these are departures. We don't necessarily care about the scheduled time, just the departure. And then we want to know what track it's on. That's what we want to be able to display to our user. So let's create a string that is the direction. Let's create a final string that is the destination. Let's create another string that is the status. And let's create a date time that is depart time. And then a string that is track. And then we need a constructor with all of those. This dot depart time, destination, direction, status, this track. Cool. All right, so we are going to be receiving these objects in JSON, and we are going to have to convert them into a Dart object. So we know we need a custom constructor to do that. So we will have one that is from JSON. It will be a map. And let's just give ourselves flexibility by making the key and the values dynamic. And that will be parsed JSON. And so we will get, we need to map to our direction property, and that will come from our parsed JSON, and that will be the direction. So the parsed JSON, we are directly mapping here. This is our object on the left side, our object property, which we've designated up here. And then this is where we're getting it out of the JSON that we're getting passed. So we want also destination is going to equal parsed JSON destination. And if I had not caught that spelling error, it would not have mapped correctly because it's looking specifically in the JSON for that property. Status is going to equal parsed JSON status. Departure time is going to equal, now this is where I want this to be, this is going to come in a string obviously from JSON, but I want to parse it. So we're going to date time parse, and that's going to be our parsed JSON depart time. And the track is going to be parsed JSON. All right, there we go. Now you also notice in the date time, the property was depart underscore time. I wanted to camel case that in my Dart object, and so I map it here, right here. This is the actual field name in the JSON, and I can map it to anything I wanted. So I've mapped it to depart time in camel case. All right, that is our train model. And so now we want to build the block. So let's go ahead and add another folder, not a file, folder. And so we'll call that blocks, and in blocks, new file. And I'm going to call it SEPTA underscore block.dart. And as I'm building this, I'm building it with the idea that if I need to, I can have a train model, and that train model is going to have the data I want on the screen. I have a block, which is a SEPTA block, which is going to deal specifically with SEPTA data off of this SEPTA API. If I wanted to, I could add more blocks down the line that are the London Tube, the New York City Transit Authority. Is that a thing? Anyway, whatever the subway system is called in New York City, BART, which is the regional rail system in the Bay Area of San Francisco, wherever in the world, we could add different blocks for that. So that's why I'm calling it SEPTA block. That's why I'm calling this generic train, not SEPTA train. I think this basically has the properties I would need for displaying on the screen for any transportation source. But this block is specifically for the SEPTA API. So in there, let's go ahead and let's do class SEPTA block. Interesting thing about doing videos is you pick up on the idiosyncrasies of your speech. I keep saying let's go ahead. I can't stop myself. I'm putting pennies in a jar every time I do it. I'm trying to cut down, I swear. So we will have a number of properties in here eventually, but let's just deal with the trains for today. So we will just deal with the properties that we're going to work with in this episode, and when we're ready to deal with other properties, which might be the station that we select in our settings, it might be the number of trains or departures that we want to receive, which we'll also set in settings. We might have a stream for the direction that we want to see. Do we want to see all directions? Do we just want northbound, southbound? We have room in this block to add those down the road, but for today, we are adding the ones that we're working with in this episode. So I will bring in a behavior subject. I'll need to import that. Comes from RxDart, and it will be a list of our train objects, which I'll also need to import, and I'll use auto import to do that. Make sure you get 2 closing brackets there. It will be underscored in blue for now. That's okay. That's a warning, and we will take care of that in a second. We are going to want getters for that property. We're going to want setters. And our getter will be a stream. It will be a list of our train object. Again, get that double curly brace there. Actually, what am I doing? No double curly brace. We just want to stream. Nope, I had it right the first time. Do that there. There we go. Get trains. This goes to our trains.stream. Beautiful. So this will allow us to publicly listen into the private variable trains that we have set here in our block. And if we want to publicly set those values, we are going to give it a list of train. And then we will give a getter that will be get train or change trains. Yeah, change trains. Trains.sync.add. There we go. We want to dispose the stream as well, so let's do ahead and go. Let's go ahead. Let's dispose of it. Create a dispose method. And we will close that train stream. And when we do that, our blue line, our warning up here, goes away. So that's the basis to create our trains list, to get it from outside of the block, to set it from outside of the block. And so now we need to actually in our block write our business, some of our business logic. And some of the business logic that we will need is to go out to that API and get the train data and load it to our stream. And we're going to create it on the creation of the block, for starters. In future episodes, we'll come up with ways to refresh it on a daily basis because the user's going to want to know when those trains are updated. They're going to want to stand there. They're going to want to look at it every minute or so and see that it's updating, that the train is 5 minutes late or 4 minutes late, or it's 1 minute out, 2 minutes out, 2 minutes out, etc. So we'll need a strategy to refresh it. But for starters, we need a strategy to go out, or we need a method to go out and get the data from the API. So let's create a void and let's call it load station data. And we will feed it a string, which will be a station. And we will send the get request, which will be, we'll create a variable called response. And we will await http.get. And this is where we want to put this right here. So let's copy what we've got here. All right, so let's replace this part here, suburban station, with interpolated string. So we'll insert our station right there. I'm going to get, instead of 5, I'm going to get 10 results from each direction. And our long-term strategy here is going to be whenever the station is changed, we want to go out and get new station data for that station. So when they go to the settings page and they say, I'm at this station, we want to go out and get it. We also want to give them the ability eventually to limit by the direction, by the number of responses that they get, I don't think it's worth going back to the API for that. We're going to have our call get 10 for each direction, and then we'll just use a filter to filter that down to what the user wants to see on the screen. We're not going to go out and change the number of responses. We're just going to go for the maximum that we will allow them to pull. And if they select less, we're just going to filter it down on their screen rather than going back to the API. So that's why we have a station variable here, and we're hard coding the number of results that we want to get. So this is using a wait, so we need to make this an async function, so we'll add async right there. We also need to import our HTTP, so let's do that. So let's come up here, import package HTTP / here's the one we want, /dart. Now we want to import this one as HTTP, and we are also going to want to use Dart convert very shortly. So let's bring that to, that is Dart convert, and we will import that as convert. All right, let me just pull that out here. Was I off the screen? Could you not see that? So here it is right here. This is the full, I copied it here. We've replaced station inside here. This is the number of records that we want to pull. It's 10. Sorry about that for sliding that off if you couldn't see that. And so that's going to get us our response object, which will look exactly like what we had here in Postman. So we'll get this suburban station, we'll get the current time, 10:22, and then we'll get all this results here. And we're getting a string back. So what I'd like to do is take advantage of the fact that we're going to get a string and use that to wipe out that dynamic key. So this is where we're going to start to get crafty. So let's replace dynamic key and also decode it. So let's do a var JSON. All right, so we're going to do convert JSON decode. So this will take our string, which we're going to get from the response body, and convert it into a dynamic JSON object. But before we do that, we could just do response.body here, and we would get this object exactly as it appears here with the dynamic key. But let's take advantage of the fact that we can mess with this to mess with it. So let's do, instead of response.body, instead of taking the whole thing, let's take a substring of it. And let's let the starting index of our substring be response.body.index of, and in here we need a pattern, and this pattern is going to be an open bracket. And so if we flip back to our Postman results here, and maybe even look at it, so there's the pretty, but let's look at it in raw. And so this is a big string here, and what I've said is take the first index of this bracket here. So what we've done is basically clip this part of the string off. And so we're picking up right here at this bracket. I want all of this here. I just don't want, I want the brackets, I want the structure of it. I don't want the dynamic key name. I want to get rid of that. So I'm going to get that, and to the front of that, I'm going to append what I actually want. So here, I'm going to stick on the front a string that has a curly brace, and in quotations has departures, a colon, and that's it. So if we look back here, what I've done is replace, trying to get this in the best position, replace all of this suburban departures, yada yada, 10:01, I've just replaced it with, I've put this curly brace back. I've taken this whole string and replaced it with departures. So that's static. I always know I can grab the departure object from my dynamic JSON, which is, you know, what I want. All right, so we have replaced that dynamic key with a static key, and we have now decoded it into a JSON object. We are on our way. So let's build a train list. And we'll just do a var trains, and it's going to be a new list of train. There, like that. And I don't need the new keyword because that's optional in Dart. And so here I'm going to create a var called north. And this is where we traverse the data to where we actually want to be. So I now have a departures key. I can count on that. After that, I can see if I go to the pretty here option, once I get inside of departures, which will be here, I'm going to have two objects and they have no key. But I know that one is northbound and one is southbound just by looking at it. So instead of a key value, I'm not going to get one when this dynamically parses. I'm actually going to get just an index. So I get departures, and then I can grab the first object inside of it, which is 0, and then I'm in here. So if I get inside here, I'm inside here, and I've got a key, an array of trains. I'm almost there, and it's got a key, and I know the key is northbound, and it's not, you know, once I get to the second object, I know the key is going to be southbound. Not ideal, but I'm sure there's some kind of business scenario that this actually serves at SEPTA. They didn't build it for us. So let's put northbound here. And so that's going to go into here and get us our array of trains that are going northbound. All right. So then we can also grab south, and Dartpad is a great place to mess around with APIs if you need to kind of experiment with them to get just the right structure. So we'll go into the second object, and that is the southbound object. And so I need to grab the array of trains, and in that one, that object, the array is called southbound. Kind of funky, but it's the way we need to grab that data. Now, I know from experience here, I've messed around with it a little bit, some of these stations are defunct, and so they don't have a object here. You get departures, and it's blank. So to make sure that that doesn't crash my app, I'm going to surround it in a try catch block, and I'll just do a print of the error. I'll take this up here. We'll stick those inside. There we go. Just hit code format rather than mess around with the tab. So I need to load up my train object. So I'm going to grab the north, and I'm going to say for each object in my north object, we'll call it train, and make sure you get in between the two parentheses here. We'll do an arrow function, and we'll do trains.add. We'll bring in our train model. Make sure you import it if you haven't done that, which you can just use the auto import to do. This is where we'll use our custom constructor, and we will pass it our parse JSON, which we have called here train. And there we go. So then we can do south, and you are not going to get the benefit of IntelliSense here. You need to type it because Dart doesn't know exactly what you're dealing with these north and south objects. So don't worry if that doesn't appear there. So train, this is the same function. Train. And so we dump them all into one train object. SEPTA has them separated out into the southbound, northbound. We don't really care. The actual train has the direction it's going, so we can sort it out from there. So we'll dump it all into one object. And what we're going to get is we're going to get if we look here, we get our list of northbounds, we get our list of southbounds. A user, at least to start, is going to want to know which train is coming next. They don't care. I want to see all the northbound trains and then the southbound trains. So we would get a list that would start with the train that's coming through the soonest and go up to the latest, and then it would start all over again when they get to southbound. So we should sort these so that they're actually in the order of their departure from the station, regardless of the direction that they're going. So let's sort. So we'll do trains dot sort. And we will give it 2 parameters in its function. We'll do an arrow function. And the best way to sort these is a.departtime.compare to b.departtime. And that will take care of it. So that will sort them from the train that's coming or leaving the station next, regardless of the direction it is going. And we've done all this work. We've got a nice array of trains. We have them sorted. We should add them to our stream. So let's update the stream. And we can do that by calling our change trains function up here in our setters. And we'll just pass it trains. Now, before we leave the BLoC, let's just add a constructor and let's build a train object or our list of trains whenever the BLoC is created. So that will get us started, and we'll refine this method over time to respond to the settings that the user has input. But to give us something to get started with, let's create one here. So let's create a SEPTA BLoC constructor. And we will call our load station data with, we'll get the suburban station. So we'll get it right here from, that's not what I meant to do. Copy, not paste. Get it right from here. And I don't think we need the 20 in there. It's an HTML thing. So we'll just leave it a space so that when we create the BLoC, for starters, we'll just get the suburban station data, which is a center city hub, which is pretty busy. So you get lots of results off of that one. So it's a good placeholder until we work in the logic to dynamically set that. So that should be a start on our BLoC. Now we need a way to inject this into the application, and the provider package is a beautiful system. It provides a beautiful system to do that. So we're going to create a provider and allow it to inject our BLoC into the application. So let's create a new folder and let's call it providers. And inside providers, we'll create a new object, which will be a SEPTA provider. So this will be pretty simple. This is class SEPTA provider with change notifier. So we're mixing in the logic to track this into the tree and inject it. We will have a variable, a final variable, which will be a SEPTA BLoC, which we'll call BLoC. I do need to import the SEPTA BLoC. We need a constructor for SEPTA provider. And this is where we will build the BLoC. So our block will become an instance of the SEPTA block right here. Let's get rid of the final. And we will create a public getter. So let's do this here, get block. Oop, that should be an underscore there. So we're accessing our private variable. This gives us a public method to get our private block variable. And that's all there is to the provider. The provider is responsible for finding the instance of the block in the tree whenever it's called upon and serving it up to the widget so that the state is maintained. It's pretty boilerplate, and with the provider package, the boilerplate is much smaller than it would be if you wrote this out by hand, which I've done in past tutorials. Not a huge deal, but provider makes it easy, so we might as well use provider. For provider to work properly, it is going to need to wrap the widget tree at a level that is higher than all the widgets that need to access it. So I am just going to wrap the material app. So we'll go wrap with widget. And here we'll put a change notifier provider. Never spell that right. And we'll need to import that, and that has a create option, which takes a build context, which will go to a SEPTA provider. Like that. And that should be all we need for our wrapping there. And so let's actually check this. That was a lot of typing, and we really haven't had an opportunity to check and make sure that it worked. And so to do that, we need to bring in a provider or a block, and that will trigger the creation of the provider and the block in the background, and we can see if we have any errors. So let's quickly do that, make sure we have data, and then we'll wrap up this episode. So if we go to departures, what we can do is just bring in the block, and that will get the whole thing started. So let's create a variable. It's a final. It's a block. We will need to import provider, and then that will give us the option of going .of. Crap, what did I do there? Of. There we go. And that is a generic. So we're gonna tell it that this is a SEPTA provider that you're bringing in. And it will say, oh, okay, SEPTA provider, I know I have a block variable in there. And there it is. All right. So when we do that, and we actually reset the state, that is going to create the provider, which is going to trigger its constructor, which is going to create an instance of the block, which is going to trigger its constructor, which is going to call the load station method, which will call our API. And so I'm going to put a breakpoint right there. I'm going to refresh this. I'm going to see that we've gotten here. I'm going to come down to actually the next break. I'm going to set a breakpoint right here at trains and advance it. Take that one away. And so if you got confused in the whole diving into this strange JSON object where we had a dynamic value, we replaced it with static, we have this array of objects that has no key here, and then you've got like a, I don't know, it's not really dynamic here key, but it's a key that's different from the one down here, even though the objects are basically the same format. If you got confused in that, here's where sorry, hit the microphone. Here's where you can kind of straighten that out. So you can look at what you got here once we brought this in, and you can see it. We replaced departures, so we can see that down here we want to go into this JSON object. We want to go into departures, And then in departures, we have value, but they have no name. They've got an array map value here, or an index of 0 or 1. So that's why down here we went departures, because that's the object we grabbed. And then as this dynamically parsed, it didn't have a key value, so it just gave us an array of 0 with an index of 0 or 1. So that's what we grabbed. And then if we were to dive into, say, 0, we can see that our value is right here, a northbound object. So we got that there. So we had to do that. And then the same thing, if you went into 1, you'd see southbound. So this can help you to start to make sense. If you can get it to the decode part, you can start to just follow down the tree of values and see what you got. And then your list of values is this map, or this array of maps. And this looks exactly like our object that we have modeled. This is our train object. So hopefully that's a little bit more clear. That is not going to work because I don't have departures spelled right. There we go. So as we go in here, did I have it spelled wrong? Yeah, I did. So we're not going to get the southbound on this pass because I misspelled the departures on here. So as we come down, I wonder if we'll get an error. Let's see. Yeah, here we go. No such method was called because we hit an error here on the southbound. And the error was caught. Tell you what, we'll just start over. There we go. So now I'm getting past here. I got my error. We flushed it out. Now I have this array of what should be 20. Yeah, it's 20 train objects with an index of starting of 0 right here that should be roughly the same data if I were to hit send here. Possibly trains coming in and out at a rapid basis here on a Monday morning. But should be roughly the same data as we have in our API call. So that's where I'm going to wrap it up today. So we did quite a bit. We first of all looked at what the data challenges were. We modeled the data that we want, which is this train object. We created a block that creates a array of trains for us, or a list of trains. Created getters to be able to get those trains, to change those trains, and then our main object here was to build the HTTP call that got the JSON, converted it to a dynamic JSON object while wiping out that dynamic key that was of no use to us and replacing it with a static key. Then working around the kind of funky layers of the JSON to get that into two arrays of trains, which we were then able to merge into our one train list. We sorted it so we have depart time, and now we are adding it to our stream. And so next time when we come back, we'll actually start to put this on the screen so we can start to see the information. We can start to set up a settings page that can filter this information and allow the user to specify exactly what they want to see for a departure board. All right, so that's it for today. I hope you found that helpful. If you did, please like, subscribe, and we will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.